I looked very bleak. Like my classmates approached me and said, "Hey, is everything okay, Eric?" Because I literally looked like someone who is from the concentration camps. Like I was super thin. I remember sitting in a bus just crying because there was such a weight on my shoulder. In that moment, I remember having a vision, and that was kind of the turning point for me.
The doctors pretty much told me the same every time. You're going to be on medication for the rest of your life. That's pretty much it, you know. Game over, right? Like nothing more to do about it, right? So, yeah. But it wasn't until I saw the sheer worry or paranoia in my doctor's face that I realized that, you know, no matter what I do, if I keep on going down this, you know, avenue of constantly shooting up, you know, pharmaceutical poison up my body, right? Then, you know, it's not going to end in a preferable manner anyway, right?
Hey, Editing Eric here. I quickly wanted to let you know that the first link in the description leads you to a document where I've summarized the key takeaways from this video. It's completely for free, no opt-in or email required, because it's so dear to my heart that this video actually changes someone's life. And if right now you're suffering from an incurable disease, I truly believe that the information and inspiration presented in this video and document has the potential to completely transform your health and change the trajectory of your life. And right now there's just a dog saying hello. Oops, sorry. I'm in Thailand right now, by the way. And yeah, if you're already healthy, this video might as well just get your health and vitality to a whole new level. And with that being said, you might have noticed that my hair has grown out just a little bit. And that's because we've recorded this video in 2022 and now it's already 2024, which honestly pains me a little bit because I would have loved to share this video with you all so much sooner. But yeah, at the end of the day, like the information in here quite literally could have saved someone's life. That being said, I believe that it's all meant to be, and I'm so grateful that I've gotten to a point where now I can fully dedicate myself to YouTube, my passion, my love, my life purpose, and there are so many more videos to come about health, spirituality, relationships, shadow work, tantra, lucid dreaming, like anything that sets my heart on fire. So stay tuned, and now I'll let you enjoy the show. Take care. All right, so welcome to my first podcast. Really happy to host you here today, Adam.
Yes, do our handshake. Let's do our handshake.
Let's start with our handshake, but we gotta sit properly. All right.
It's a handshake.
Try again.
There we go. There we go.
Right.
Okay.
Welcome to our podcast. So this is our first episode, actually. We are sitting here in the BCN hotel in Barcelona. It's like, I think, 2 a.m. at night, right?
Yeah.
So
pretty late, guys.
Yeah. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, man.
I'm Eric, and yeah, tell us, how did we end up here?
Oh, well, I mean, we just got back from a 6-day-long expedition with Wim Hof. It's the summer expedition, like here in Spain. We've already done like 15 minutes of ice bath. We've summited like a mountain, canyoning. So, yeah, keep on adding to that. That's why we're here, I guess. And obviously I'm slurring my words because it's 2 a.m. like we said, and we're on zero sleep at the moment. But we promise there's a lot of fun stuff we have to share with you guys, I'll tell you.
Exactly. So we basically met like 2 years ago in a Facebook group, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Because both of us struggled with massive health issues. Wim Hof and his ice bath, breathwork, meditation, mindset definitely was a big part of both of our healings, or at least it was one part of our journey. But before we get into our experience with the summer expedition, we'll dive deeper into Adam's story as well as mine. Officially, he was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis.
Yes.
And I was diagnosed basically with Crohn's disease, which is basically also a chronic gut inflammation. at the end of the day, it's all basically the same, no matter if it's irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, IBD, like all the inflammation stuff. It's basically an autoimmune disease where your body attacks itself, right? It's basically the immune system turning on the body and attacking an organ. And there are many different variations of it. Maybe you guys have heard of Hashimoto's or some other autoimmune condition. And this can be extremely horrible. Like, honestly, it's just one of the worst feelings, knowing that your body kind of is starting to destroy itself. And then when you ask the doctors, it's supposed to be an incurable disease, and the only solution they have is some steroid medication, which has severe side effects. So we've had very similar journeys, met in a Facebook group, which was all about healing yourself, right? Both of us basically discovered this through YouTube, through inspirational videos of people who claimed to have healed themselves. And yeah, friendship developed, and that's kind of how we ended up here. Because, you know, what would be a better place than meeting on a Wim Hof expedition? But yeah, before we get into that, Adam, let's dive into your journey.
2018, like I think November or December, I was diagnosed officially with the biopsy results and all of that with ulcerative colitis, and that's how I actually, that's when I started medicating as well. So 16 years old, basically. And this happened around like when I started high school. So, I mean, you could probably imagine the sheer frustration of, you know, having to, you know, make new friends and all that, and at the same time, you know, dealing with whatever this thing was, right? So basically, what ulcerative colitis is, inflammation of the colon. So the last part of your digestive system, that's like the colon, right? So my issue was I had an inflamed colon, which would like also cause bleeding and a lot of other shit that we might not need to go into further detail, right? So, I mean, Google's there for a reason, so you can search whatever the hell it is. So you do your thing, right? But yeah, so it was very kind of very disheartening to having to go through all of that when you were kind of looking forward to this, you know, high school feeling, right? You know, meeting new friends, meeting new people. You know, this was finally the year I was gonna kind of break through with, you know, friendships and relationships, maybe get a girlfriend or whatever, like eventually. But, you know, it ended up being somewhat of a slap in the face, because this is when I realized like the sheer importance of listening to your body, in a sense that if you completely go like all out reckless without, you know, knowing what's happening around you in your environment or whatever inside of you, at least, then, you know, you're bound to get a wrist slap from the universe, I guess. So yeah, that's my story, but, you know, obviously there's more to it.
Yeah, tell us more. How did the first symptoms arise, and how did your family react? What was kind of the journey? You know, I personally noticed that a lot of people I talk to, they have this phase where first they rely on conventional medicine, right? And then later on they realize, oh no, this is a dead end, right? Because conventional medicine is amazing when it comes to stuff that just needs fixing, like a broken leg or something like that. But when it comes to chronic disease, no matter if it's autoimmune conditions, cancer, depression, and so on, they don't have solutions, right? And that's what both of us realized. So walk us through your journey.
All right, so basically, so around like I would say September of 2018, I just started school, right? So it was that aspect of it, you know, the nervousness, the kind of small, you know, a little bit of anxiety going into school for the first time. You know, this is a different, you know, I guess level of education or whatever. That's what they told us, right? But, you know, just simply, you know, September, summer had just ended. I felt super amazing throughout the whole summer. Used to work at the summer job at my parents, running this hotel, right? So for a while, I was fine, you know, very, I don't want to say quote unquote athletic, but, you know, I was training a lot, I'd consider myself fit back then. You know, my diet was, you know, wasn't too heavy on the sugar or anything like that. It was, you know, pretty much, you know, an average, you know, kid diet, whatever. I don't know what everyone would eat back then, but it's, you know, normal food, right? So as soon as my stomach kind of started turning back in like in September, I was almost looking back, you know, what is causing this? Is it the food? Well, and this eventually led to my kind of demise into, you know, being too picky with whatever I was eating. But you see, what happened was, after being so overly conscious of what I was doing, it kind of led me into an evil spiral later on. But well, I will get into that later on. But what happened was, I went to school one day with so much pain in my stomach for whatever reason, right? Going to the bathroom, like having to run to the bathroom, which is, you know, a little embarrassing for me back then, right? Having to, you know, excuse myself every single time I had to like leave the classroom going to the bathroom, because I never used to use the school bathrooms. I don't know about you all, but like it was, for me, it was kind of a funny, like the toilets in our school were like a no-go zone, right? So like having to use the bathrooms were like, kind of everything, right? You know, contaminated or whatever. So using the bathrooms all the time, you know, stomach cramps, aching, and, you know, loose bowels, like it was just, you know, it was a whole mess, right? And this was, you know, going on for like 2 to 3 weeks, and I was very quiet about it, because like usually when it comes to any form of like disease or like condition, people like, or generally teenagers or anyone for that matter, men especially, we kind of tend to kind of keep it on the low so as to not worry, you know, relatives or loved ones, or sometimes merely because it can be a little embarrassing, right? So after like 3 weeks of going through this and staying quiet, it eventually started to show on my appearance, right? I came home one day from like spending time with friends, right? And my face was completely like pale and yellow. And this kind of, you know, living in a traditional Middle Eastern, you know, household, right? You know, my dad or my parents kind of like assumed I was taking something, right? Especially since this was like around high school. I was being offered like weed left and right. So my parents thought I was, you know, on something. Like, why is your face so pale or whatever? I was like, well, I don't know, yada, 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 trying to make excuses or whatever. And then I just told them that, well, this is what's been happening. And I mean, I've been going through like this shit for like a few weeks, right? And that's when they kind of like rang the bells, and, you know, that's when they, you know, decided to take me to the hospital, right? And that is where my journey with Western medicine started to, you know, where it actually commenced, right? So fast forward to October of 2018, I still didn't have a diagnosis of what this was. Doctors said that, you know, it could be IBS, we're not sure, but it's probably, you know, just a little bit of stress, considering you've just started high school, right? So this is probably stressor related. And that was that. So I was pretty much assuming that this was some sort of IBS or whatever, right? Not knowing, you know, what's, you know, really behind it and what it actually meant. But it wasn't until like November of the same year, like one month later, where I decided to actually go to Turkey before I could actually get a complete diagnosis in Sweden. I didn't even get a time to kind of test myself out fully. So my dad decided to book a ticket to Turkey. We did an emergency colonoscopy there, where they, you know, basically gave me, I would say, like the initial or the preliminary diagnosis of ulcerative colitis, right? And I was like, well, that's fine, right? Because there's probably a cure for it, right? Because like modern day, right? Like all this new, you know, technology with medicine and all that shit, you know, I felt as if, you know, surely there has to be some sort of cure, right? Some sort of medication or treatment that's going to get rid of this. But it wasn't until I saw the sheer kind of worry or like paranoia in my doctor's face that I realized that, well, maybe this isn't, maybe this isn't, the most slightest or mildest kind of, condition. So when I got back home to Sweden, we did another colonoscopy, and that's when they fully kind of gave me the diagnosis of ulcerative colitis. They took some biopsy samples and sent it into a lab, and that's when I, got the news, right? Started getting cortisone, orally from the get-go, very high doses to kind of like really break down the inflammation in my body. And this in and of itself caused a myriad of issues, right? So like, and very like visible issues, right? Like visible kind of changes in my body, which also was kind of embarrassing considering I was still in high school at this time. So, I didn't want anyone to find out, but, with the medication, it got even more visible, right? So like cortisone caused like puffy face, whatever, very low energy, sometimes very high energy, sometimes, extreme insomnia, like severe cases of that. Like I couldn't sleep for days on end. Severe anxiety, paranoia, hallucinations at night sometimes, easy bruising. I can name them all. It was horrible. I wasn't feeling anywhere near like myself. And I mean, sure, the inflammation had kind of gone down a little bit, but at what cost? It was not worth it whatsoever, right? So after being on the cortisone, they put me on something called Asacol, which is like a slow releasing tablet, which is supposed to coat the insides of your intestines, right? But I later came to find out that this medication, right, this pill that is supposed to help you, contains some like banned toxin plastic or whatever that's banned in children's toys, because it can cause problems with fertility, which was also very disheartening considering like this was the only option I had, right? None of this actually helped, by the way. So like I was still on the cortisone, still taking very high doses of this suppressant, right? And eventually they put me on something called infliximab, which is almost like a low-dose chemotherapy, and it basically suppresses like alpha blockers in your body, which is supposed to kind of indirectly stop this attack from the immune system. But it didn't lead to anything. I still felt super weird, not like myself, very low energy levels, and quite frankly, my condition just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. The doctors pretty much told me the same every time. You're gonna be on medication for the rest of your life, and there's not much you can do about it apart from just keep on trying new different medication. But you're probably gonna take this for the rest of your life, and that's pretty much it. Game over, right? Like nothing more to do about it, right? So yeah, I mean that's my journey with the Western medicine up until this point, right? What about you, Eric? How did you kind of like, I don't know how your diagnosis came about, but
yeah,
that was pretty much it for me.
I like how you told your story, because obviously I know Adam's background, and for me it was a similar journey, because right now we don't really know what has caused all of this, right? It kind of came out of the blue.
Yes,
and but before we get into the reasons that I think both of us found out later on, right?
Yeah.
What initially caused it, before we get to the reasons what caused this severe condition, and the solution, right? Let me get into how, I kind of ended up at the lowest point of my life so far, at least. And I just want to say from the get-go that both of us, or I mean, at least I can definitely say from my perspective, I'm incredibly grateful for this journey. Right?
Yes. Likewise, man.
It has taught us so much, and it humbled us, right? As young stars, you think you're invincible, conquering the world. Right. But if you face not necessarily death, right? We weren't like terminally ill with cancer or anything. And we've met people on this Wim Hof Summer Expedition who were so severely ill, and that sparked so much compassion in my heart, because seeing their suffering reminded me of what we went through. And both of us, we went through, we ate shit. Like, we ate shit. But these people, right, it was on another level. Yeah. Like, what's the guy's name? Well,
Darius.
I think so. The guy had like cancer all over his body, or another guy, he lost his dad and his brother. Both of them died from hypothermia, so freezing to death. And what is he doing? He goes to Wim Hof and does a 15 fucking minute ice bath. Like, this is so brave. And I mean, I literally cried one afternoon, releasing all my pain and traumas, and also thinking about the pain of the people in our group who went through these unbelievable things, right? And this pain, I not only had so much compassion for it, but I also saw the beauty in it, right? Because pain is beauty and beauty is pain. But we'll get to all of this later. For now, what was my low point? How did I end up in the shithole conventional medicine has dug for us? And we're not hating on conventional medicine, right? It has its validity and its strength, right? But also massive weaknesses when it comes to these chronic diseases. And we've unfortunately had gotten to know that firsthand. So I personally, telling it from the perspective of myself back then, I didn't know what was going on. I remember winter 2018, for some reason I couldn't really digest meat very well. So I ate meat, and afterward I had like diarrhea. And then over the 6 months until summer 2019, it got worse and worse. And at some point I had like so bad pain in my stomach that I was driving to school or taking a train ride to school. And I was literally cramping out of pain. So at some point, I was like, okay, I need to go to the doctor. And they basically shoved a camera down my throat while I was awake, like without painkillers or anything. Me as well, Like, this is so humiliating. You have to understand, this is so... It really knocks your ego, right? It gets shoved down your throat and it's super painful, and then it moves in your stomach, the camera, and like grabs like meat off your stomach wall or something, right?
Yes, the biopsies.
Biopsies. Long story short, they found parasites in my stomach. What's it called? H. pylori? Or?
H. pylori,
Yeah, pylori, whatever. Yes. So there were parasites. So I thought, okay, cool. What can I do? Just take antibiotics, right? So I took antibiotics for like 5 or 7 days, shit out all the parasites, excuse my language. And then I was fine. Like, the parasites were gone. I thought, oh, awesome. And I went full monk mode with my business. I just started my advertising agency, which has now grown into an e-commerce growth partner. I was like super motivated, 3 weeks, worked all day, all night. And then, boom, out of the blue, I was hit with a massive inflammation in my intestines, right? Yeah. It was like summer holidays. Usually they are 6 weeks long in Germany. And like midway through, I was completely knocked out. And for the rest of the summer holidays, I was just lying in bed, basically doing nothing. And when school just started, I still had to stay at home in bed for a couple more weeks because I was just so knocked out. And how did it express itself? I had like diarrhea, I had gut pain, and at some point, going to the toilet hurt so much that I said, no, I can't eat anymore. Like, I literally did a water fast for 7 days because it hurt so much to go to the toilet. And at that point, I did a, what's it called, colonoscopy?
Yes,
Yeah.
colonoscopy.
So I went to the hospital, colonoscopy, and I could barely walk. Like I remember having like
A cane.
like a walking sticks, like whatever you call them. I was like walking to the hospital. I could barely walk. I lost like 10, 15 kilograms. I don't know what that in pounds is, but it was so painful, even sitting on my ass, because I had something which I hadn't realized at that point, that in the car, I was like lying on the back seat, and I mean, it was horrible. So they prescribed me some medication. They didn't know what was going on. They also didn't understand why I had so much pain pooping. So yeah, that's that. And then the medication kind of helped, put basically a Band-Aid on my broken leg, right? They didn't treat the symptom at all. They just put some medication on top to reduce the inflammation. And then for like half a year, it was kind of steady, right? I was a vegan at the time, but I could eat less and less and less until I literally only ate rice and quinoa. And I had severe malnutrition. I was taking all kinds of supplements, but I looked very bleak. Like my classmates approached me and said, "Hey, is everything okay, Eric?" Because I literally looked like someone who is from the concentration camps. Like I was super thin, and I'll throw up some images. It kind of was okay, but I could eat less and less. And at first I tried the FODMAP diet and all kinds of stuff. And then in the winter, I kind of regained some weight because I started working out again. But then in the spring of 2020, that's when I got sick, which is interesting because like the 2 years beforehand, I literally got sick every second or third week, which was so annoying because I worked out and then I got sick and then I lost the muscle and then I worked out and then I got sick. And that was because of the parasites. When the parasites went away for half a year, I didn't get sick, but spring 2020 was the first time I got sick again. And then I was really sick for like 5 weeks straight. And then I was like, what's going on? And at that point, I had no idea why the inflammation was caused initially, right? Even though it could have given me a hint that I took antibiotics right beforehand, but I didn't realize that yet at the time. And that's not the only reason. But I took antibiotics again because I was sick for 5 weeks straight, spring of 2020, didn't know what was going on. So I thought, hey, antibiotics, my doctor tells me it will help, so I did it. But then my microbiome, so the good bacteria in my gut, got completely wiped out, and I had another severe spike of my inflammation, and I was completely knocked out. Like completely. I think this was literally the lowest point of my life because I lost like 20 kilograms. I literally only weighed like 55 kilograms at height of 6.1 foot, which is like 185 centimeters. I lost all my friends, partially due to the health issues, partially due to other business endeavors I had beforehand, because right before I started my advertising agency in summer 2019, beforehand I was doing something else, which was extremely stressful, right? And at that point I started to figure out that probably because I was so stressed out, plus taking the antibiotics, might have had something to do with my chronic gut inflammation, but I wasn't quite at that point yet. But I started to realize, okay, maybe there's a correlation because now I was very, very severely ill right after taking antibiotics for the second time in a row. So because I was super stressed out and I did this kind of sketchy get-rich-quick scheme, I lost a lot of friends, and my school grades also degraded, and I was also not only on a success trip, but also on a spiritual trip. So I was kind of pretty arrogant at that time. So this was definitely due to me. But you have to understand that all areas of my life were crashing. So bad school grades, bad business, severely ugly health. And also what I forgot to mention is that the guys at the hospital, when they did the colonoscopy, right, even though I was getting the painkillers or what's it called when you are completely knocked out from anesthesia, right?
Yeah.
Even though I was completely gone, I was still screaming of pain, and they didn't realize that I had an abscess. So that's what they found out later, which got operated, and then for like 6 months or whatever, I had to flush it out. I literally had a hole, like meat was taken away, so I had to spray it with the shower every day. So that was not so nice. But anyway, long story short, that was like the lowest point. And I remember sitting in a bus just crying because there was such a weight on my shoulder. And in that moment, I remember having a vision, and I interpret this to be my higher self, lifting up my fragile little ego with his little finger, and it was this colorful figure, huge, muscular, and like my little self was like super fragile, ungroomed and whatever. And then I also had a vision of like a blue man running out of his circumstances. He ran so fast that like his shirt was ripping apart, and that was kind of the turning point for me. And I'd love to hear what was your turning point? Like, when was it enough? When did you realize, okay, look, conventional medicine, they only have this medicine, right? For me, at that point, they also prescribed me this cortisone stuff, right, which is like steroids, which have severe side effects.
It's an immunosuppressant. It's basically hindering your body from doing what it's designed to do.
Exactly.
Pretty much, yeah.
And then you have to understand at that point, COVID was taking off. So we had to suppress our immune system while everyone was paranoid that the world was going down.
Yeah, so whilst everyone was eating like garlic and shit to try to strengthen their immune system, here we were like with a weakened one and stuff. So I mean, my kind of turning point when I kind of realized that, you know, enough is enough, this is not gonna end well for me, was probably during 2019, and this was around the summer of 2019. That's when I kind of decided that, you know, whatever I'm taking right now, you know, the immunosuppressants, the low dose chemotherapy that I've been taking for like around 6 months leading up to this point, you know, it just was not working, right? It was not healing me. It was not, you know, even treating the condition itself. You know, this was when I came to realize that you know, if I keep going on like this, it's pretty much not gonna end well. Like, that's, you know, period, right? I realized that this medication, right, wasn't actually, like you said, it wasn't curing or like even treating or healing anything. It was just putting like a band-aid on a broken leg. It was just masking the messages of the symptoms. That's essentially what a symptom is. It's your body messaging you in some form that, you know, something is wrong, right? And if you know, mask the symptoms, which is the message of the body, then you're just like censoring all of that. You're not pointing at the true cause, or like going at the true cause of what is causing all of this, right? So there you are, pretty much in a dilemma with your own self as to, you know, what the right way of approach is, considering, you know, your body's trying to tell you one thing, and here you are doing the direct opposite of what your body's trying to say, right? So around this time, you know, like everyone else, the first thing you do is you go into the holistic, kind of paradigm instead. You try to shift from this, Western medicine of, masking the symptoms and pharmaceutical drugs or whatever, and you go into this holistic approach instead. For me, that was like, okay, I felt a little better doing that. Even my health kind of improved a little bit. I gained back some weight. Energy levels started to return. All these essential oils I used to take kind of, made me feel better by myself. That I was, at least doing something about it, right? Repopulating my gut with, good bacteria, probiotics and whatever. I studied a lot on that, thinking, that's probably the answer to all of this, which in partly it was, but this was around the time that I was kind of still, scared, or not scared, but, very hesitant and reluctant to kind of let off the Western medicine. So fast forward to around 2020, this was like right at the cusp of COVID. I kind of started to feel ready to kind of let off the Western medicine, so like the low dose chemotherapy, the Asacol, all of that. I wanted to completely wean off of that, at my own risk, obviously. So the doctors and my parents were obviously not happy with this, but at this time, by this time I was feeling a lot better, and they kind of, the results up until this point kind of seemed promising to a certain degree. So it kind of allowed for my parents and even the doctors to kind of, okay, well, the doctors were never okay with it, but who cares, right? So by this point, I stopped taking the injections of infliximab, the low dose chemotherapy, and I took no pill or any medication, right, from the doctors whatsoever. So I was completely freeballing it. It was only essential oils, anti-inflammatory kind of oils and probiotic treatments, and that was pretty much it. And I felt okay for like 4-5 weeks maybe, and that is when overnight, like that, my health flipped upside down like nothing else. So I felt an intense pain in my stomach again after, feeling fine for pretty much almost a year, right? Symptoms were kind of, they weren't showing nearly as much during this period. So I pretty much felt, oh, well, I'm okay now. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like,
and that's because you just stopped the medication, right?
Yeah, I stopped the medication. So I feel like, I don't know if it was some subconscious, trigger after that, or if I pretty much, wasn't ready yet to be to go off of all of that yet, which is, I mean, you have to remember that, even though Western medicine isn't always right, in acute conditions, like when you break a leg or an arm or, get stabbed or whatever, I mean, then obviously you're not going to pull out your essential oils and start rubbing your body, hoping everything's going to, go well. I mean, obviously to a certain extent, we have to rely on Western medicine, but it's the chronic, like you said, when it pertains to chronic conditions, then obviously it's not something you can really rely on, So, after weaning off of all this medication, even though I had the faith that I was, pretty much all right by this point, my health started going downhill because I knew that I hadn't really addressed the true cause of what was causing all of this yet, right?
And at that point, did you kind of figure out why it even started in the first place, or was it still an unknown?
I thought it was because of, like an ibuprofen I had taken, like a very strong ibuprofen called naproxen, which I took in the weeks leading up to the diagnosis, right? So this was around September, August, something like that, that I'd taken this for my back. So I'd hurt my back, in the gym. So I strained the muscle or something, I don't know. And I got prescribed this very strong ibuprofen pill. And from what I heard, this pill has been, is known for sometimes causing, inflammation or irritation in the mucosal lining of your digestive tract, right? Or any mucosal lining, for that matter. So I kind of blamed it on that initially, but then I realized later on, well, hey, maybe it's related to the food I was eating, which also led me into an evil spiral later on, which was, I pretty much blamed every single food for my demise. So that was, kind of like I shot myself in the foot right there. Because if you're not being able to eat any food whatsoever, and the foods that you're kind of eating like barely contain any nutrients or are not so sustainable for a long-term diet, then you've kind of done yourself a disservice, right? So at this point, I mean, I don't want to venture off too much. I digress, but I want to get back to the fact that I had weaned off and stopped the medication. So this was around beginning of 2020. I felt like, excuse my language, like shit, like absolute pure shit. That's how I felt. Symptoms returned instantly. Blood in my stool again. Urgency, running to the bathroom. Extreme pain, fatigue, a lot of trembling at this point. My arms would shake throughout the day because of the lack of nutrient, I guess, absorption from the digestive tract itself, and also because I was losing a lot of blood. So I wasn't doing very well, as you can imagine. So I would say this happened around April of 2020, and then by August of 2020, I had lost around 20 kgs, like 20 kilos, which is around 50 pounds maybe. So, you can imagine how I looked visibly, visually just, completely drained. I looked like a stick, pretty much like a stick figure that you draw. That's what I looked like, right? Just horrible. And people obviously took notice of this. What's wrong with you, Adam? Why don't you just go back to the medication? Then people start pressuring you. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is obviously not working. Whatever it is, the holistic approach, right? So, I mean, you should probably get back to it. You kind of scary looking, right? But even though I had kind of gotten a slap in the face from being a little too responsible with how I approached this new method of healing myself, I still had the determination. This was still my turning point. I realized that no matter what I do, if I keep on going down this avenue of constantly shooting up pharmaceutical poison up my body, right, poisoning my liver and all of that, then it's not going to end in a preferable manner anyway, right? So going back to Western medicine was never really a choice for me, because I understood that would just be an evil cycle for the rest of my life that would just never stop. So having a really hard time finding what was going to help me and all that, but I was still determined, right? The determination was completely still there. Sometimes I would get a little, doubtful. Sometimes, is this really what I'm supposed to do? Is this right of me to do? Which, obviously comes natural, because when you're suffering to the extent that, I was suffering, or Eric was suffering, I mean, it's very easy to kind of lose track of what you're doing. But eventually, feeling really, really bad after a while, I'd say around maybe September or November of 2020, there was this, I decided to maybe open up YouTube, as a last resort, kind of like a scream for help. I searched for how to treat or how to cure ulcerative colitis, because at this point I felt so bad that I was willing to try anything, no matter how stupid it sounded or whatever. The holistic approach I previously had tried didn't really work, so I was determined to, and willing and open-minded to try something else. That's when I was served an ad on YouTube, right? From a guy called Michael Merrill, from Heal Your Gut guy. And I was like, he was promising, you know, us how to, or he promised, you know, in the ad, he was promising pretty much, you know, complete healing, right? That you could go from a really severe state of gut disease to pretty much completely healed within a few months maybe, or whatever, right? And that I was going to be able to tolerate any food again and be able to live my life normally. And as you can imagine, this was, you know, very promising, right? It was very, it gave me a big sense of hope, right? A lot of hope in that moment. So clicked on the link, obviously, checked it out. Was like, hey, I mean, I've already spent so much money on it.
Got nothing to lose.
Got nothing to lose, right? So I mean, and by the way, like when your health is in demise and you're suffering and pain and whatever, the last thing you think about is money. And I think you probably can agree with this. Like, money is like your last, like the last thing you ever think about. It's probably your last priority, right? That I just, you know, the same instant, just, you know, bought the course and just, you know, went through it like it was like a school catalog or whatever, like the
binge watching Netflix.
It's like binge watching Netflix, just watching every single episode, right? Every module. And obviously to this program, right, was a Facebook group. And a lot of, you know, members of this Facebook group, you know, posted like an introductory kind of, they kind of introduced themselves in the group, right? So I kind of read through everything to try to resonate with someone who had a similar background like me, you know, UC or ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, whatever it was, right? But that, you know, was also around my age because, you know, I don't know, like, I don't want to say it's easier to communicate with someone my age or that would be able to resonate with, you know, whatever I was, you know, going through, right? Because, you know, sure, you could like speak to a 40 or 50-year-old, but I don't think they would, you know, resonate or could relate with the fact that, you know, this happened to you whilst you're in high school, like you're 16 years old, and this happened to you in your teenage years, right? I felt robbed of my teenage years, right? So I saw this post of a guy who was 18 years old, had Crohn's disease, whatever, and that he'd been battling it for a little while, and that this course kind of was like a new kind of stepping stone for him, right? So I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, so I commented on this post. I was like, well, hey, like, that sounds amazing, brother. Let's beat this thing together. And I think the message is still there. It was Eric's post, obviously, and that's how we essentially met, or like kind of got introduced to each other, right? That's how we met virtually, and that's when our journeys kind of intercepted. Yeah, the kind of the intersection of our journey, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's where it all began. And, you know, throughout this whole course, you know, Mike, the Heal Your Gut guy, I mean, obviously he did his absolute best to kind of find the what was most fitting at the time. So initially it was, you know, diet. So we tried to switch up my diet. We thought that, you know, the Western diet had kind of hurt us. You know, not preparing the food the right way like our primitives used to do, like our primal ancestors. So that's the first approach we took. We started cooking food that way. Didn't really help me, made me tolerate the foods better, but didn't really actually help in healing me, right? The second thing that was, you know, kind of became popular in this group was kind of adjusting the terrain in your body. So it wasn't any bacteria that was causing the pain or the condition itself or your immune system for that matter, but it was the bad terrain or the unsuitable terrain in your body, like the mineral levels, the salinity levels in your body, whatever, right? I didn't really get into that too deep, so I couldn't really tell, you know, if it worked for me or not, but that definitely didn't work for me because I drank a bunch of seawater hoping it would help me. But it
sounds
didn't.
crazy, but it actually helped a couple of people.
Yeah, I think it helped a few people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in my case, I got like maybe a boost of energy a little bit, but
yeah,
you know, it wasn't enough. I mean, drinking like almost a quarter of a liter of seawater every day wasn't really my jam, right? So, you know, that was that. And then eventually, something called German New Medicine popped up in the group. I was like, well, let me check this out. And eventually that was what eventually led to my breakthrough.
And
yes.
before we get to that
Yes.
and how exactly it helped you break through, I just want to continue or stress that point that there are so many things that can be done to heal yourself, right? And even if it's the exact same condition, it could be completely different solutions. Because here's the thing about chronic disease. It's caused by a variety of things. And everyone has different keys. And for Adam, it was German New Medicine. For me, it was something else. And the year 2020, for me, was the year of experimentation. Because after 7 months or 8 months of trusting conventional medicine, at some point, the pain just became so much, right? And when I had my lowest point, and then this vision, which represented the turning point, I realized, okay, I gotta take this into my own hand. And I remember talking with my mom, and she's like very holistic when it comes to medicine, but she said, hey, look, I'm getting to the edge of what I know, and you'll have to take charge yourself, right? Because it's basically a full-time job doing that. And I remember always putting it off, focusing on my business, focusing on school, like saying, okay, if I can't tolerate the suffering, I'll take care of this after I graduate or whatever it may be. But in 2020, I said, okay, I gotta make this a priority, right? I gotta make this a priority. And it's basically a full-time job. So that's when I discovered a YouTube video, because I searched on YouTube by a guy called Honnas. And it was super inspirational because he talked about how he healed himself, and he had an interview with the Heal Your Gut guy, and that's how I came across that dude. And the community, of course, was very motivating. Through the community, I met Adam. Yeah. I also met another guy called Danny. He actually has a YouTube channel himself. I'll link it right below. It's German. And he also had an interview with the Heal Your Gut guy, which was very funny. They talked about how he ate ice cream for the first time after such a long time. Because you have to understand, for us at that point, it was impossible to eat basically anything, right? There was a time where I was only eating rice and quinoa, and I was still having diarrhea every freaking day. And like just eating a pizza or an apple, right? Eating an apple caused severe pain. Like, it's insane if I think back to it. And when I first discovered the Heal Your Gut guy, he proposed a carnivore diet, which is basically just eating meat, right? And if you've never heard of it, you're probably as shocked as I was back then. And my mom as well. Like, she would have never believed that meat could be a cure to this. But interestingly enough, it actually makes your gut rest, because most of it gets digested already in the small intestine, and my inflammation was at the end of the small intestine towards the big intestine or the colon. So the meat was basically already digested when it came to that point. And the theory we learned at that point was basically, hey, you have bad bacteria in your gut, candida or whatever it may be, which causes leaky gut syndrome, which basically means that your intestine wall lets through stuff like gluten and bread and like other molecules, and then because this stuff is not supposed to be in the bloodstream, your body attacks it, and that's how the immune system runs amok and then attacks your intestines, right? So what you want to do is heal the leaky gut. How do you do that? By getting rid of the bad bacteria who attack your gut wall, right? So what are the steps? First, carnivore diet, because the bad bacteria survives on sugar and carbohydrates. If you cut that out, you only get protein and fat, which basically means only meat. No cheese, no eggs, no salad, no vegetables, no fruits, nothing. No bread, no wheat, just meat. Now, in order to get all vitamins you need. You also include organs, right? Because they basically got all the vitamins you need. I recommend chicken liver or chicken heart, and then mix it up. You can make meatballs. They are, by the way, really delicious. But don't take this too seriously. This is like not all the stuff we tried out helped us partially, but that won't necessarily help you. But it might, right? Because some people, the autoimmune condition might have been caused by toxins, by heavy metals, right? For others, it might have been emotional trauma. For others, it might have been malnutrition, right? It's probably a combination of a lot of things. But I did the carnivore diet, also drinking bone broth every day, because when you starve the bacteria and only eat meat, you need to balance that with like glycine or something like that, which is in bone broth. And the bone broth, because it has collagen in it, which is really good for your skin. And guess what? Your colon is basically just skin inside. It heals the colon and rebuilds the leaky gut, or heals the leaky gut by rebuilding the gut wall. So there was kind of the theory behind it. And after doing that on and off for a couple of months, I really did it strictly for 3 months straight, which was insanely hard, because eating meat for breakfast, eating meat for lunch, and eating meat for dinner is freaking boring. So yeah, I did that for 3 months straight. And then after I had starved the bad bacteria and rebuilt my gut wall, that was very sensitive with the bone broth, I started introducing very slowly probiotics to rebuild the gut microbiome, the good bacteria, with kefir, which is fermented milk, and probiotics and all that stuff, which kind of helped, but not really. So there was a lot of other things I did, like coconut oil enemas and a lot of other stuff that might sound crazy, but you know, when you are in searing pain and you are hopeless, right, you grab every straw. And this was really one big part of the journey, the mental game, right?
Yes.
So battling, not necessarily with depression, but hopelessness, right? It's so easy to fall into this victim mindset, and be sorry for yourself, etc., etc. But that's not gonna get you anywhere. So Kenny Honnas actually helped me a lot with that. He empowered me a lot. And interestingly enough, at some point, and this is something I talked to Danny about a lot, and I guess you have something to say about this as well, is what's the root cause of this, right? What's the root cause? Because in order to heal ourselves, we need to understand what's the root cause of it. So why would 99% of people, or the majority of people, why are they able to eat everything and we are not, right? Or suddenly we are not, right? Why is that? Now, you can say, okay, because of genetics, this and that, or you can say, okay, because you took antibiotics that destroyed your microbiome. But then again, there are many people who take antibiotics and they don't get these severe illnesses. So what's the root cause? And interestingly enough, most people start by eliminating stuff out of the diet. Okay, I can't tolerate this, I can't tolerate that, right? But why can't you tolerate it? So even if you're able to take probiotics and rebuild your gut microbiome, like what was the root cause? And interestingly enough, it's basically always an emotional root cause, aka stress. And stress can be loneliness, stress can be stress at school, stress with your parents, stress with your business, whatever it may be. And I guess that's where you can take it. What was your root cause? What do you believe to have caused the disease? And what was your breakthrough when it comes to emotional healing?
Okay, I understand. All right, so I mean, I'll just take it off, continue with resume the story with, heal your gut guy, because that's where like my breakthrough came through, right? When he introduced this thing called German New Medicine, which is like apparently it's been around for a while, but I've never heard of it. I don't think Eric ever heard of it before, right? So When Mike introduced us to the course, it was kind of like this. It seemed like this hocus pocus thing. Like, what is this? Like, like you basically think that I'm going to believe that I just need to tell myself I'm going to tolerate whatever food and I'll just tolerate it. I don't know. It kind of seemed a little out there, right? But I'll start from the beginning. So the German New Medicine perspective of illnesses, right, or disease is, what causes this, whatever condition you have, is a conflict shock. And basically, it's a stress, like Eric said, a stress that your body recognizes within its environment. So, it could be like you getting robbed, or you being, let's say, discriminated in front of everybody, or, made fun of all the time. It could be anything, right? In my case, it was a grudge I held with a teacher, right? Or multiple teachers in school. And funny enough, right, this happened in high school, right? My condition kind of came about during high school, or the beginning of high school, and that's where all the teachers were, right? And that is when I came to realize that, oh shoot, I used to fight with this teacher all the time. And every time I came into school, I would get this weird, uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, like butterflies, and my stomach would turn upside down, and I just feel like all over the place, right? Super anxious, because I felt as if I was heading into a dangerous territory, almost like enemy territory, or whatever, right? So every time I walked into class, or school for that matter, like the whole building, or even seeing the school building, was enough to kind of give me this, turning knot in my stomach. So basically, for 5 full weeks in school, I had this weird kind of on and off, confrontation with this teacher, him kind of picking on me, like in class, like trying to pretty much make fun of me in front of all the classmates and all that. So, it wasn't cool on my part. I didn't like that. So I obviously kind of retaliated and, kept on going back and forth with this guy, right? So we kind of, or I at least held a grudge on him for a while until, the last 5th week, I guess. That is when we kind of resolved the issue. We squashed the beef, right? And I told him, like, yo, like, I don't want to have any, further confrontations with you. Like, I'm not here to, cause any trouble. And I'm sure you're not, here either for that. So, I mean, let's just, put this aside, please, and start, restart this relationship, and, we set the foot on the right track, right?
And this was back in 2018, right?
This was back in 2018,
Yeah.
right? So I was like, whatever, I'm not here for any trouble. We kind of got, we got off on the wrong foot, let's put it that way. By this time, I felt like, whatever, now I went into school not as, anxious anymore, just whatever, fulfilling my duties, and that was it. So that was pretty much it. Everything kind of felt normal again. I could, actually go to school without feeling like the sense of stress. And that is precisely when I started to experience symptoms. Precisely when I started to experience symptoms. And I truly believe, that is when I truly believe that German New Medicine actually worked, right? Because that is what they talk about. Like, you have something called a conflict active phase. So first you have a conflict shock. And in my case, the conflict shock was having a verbal fight with a teacher, swear words left and right. I mean, I was 16, so you could imagine, the furiousness out of a 16-year-old, back then being put on like the spot in front of his classmates, right? So that was my conflict shock, very like confrontational fight, right? And that led to a bunch of days or weeks, even 5 weeks to be precise, of something called a conflict active phase. So my this issue with my teacher never got resolved. So for 5 weeks, I had this, anxiety, like I just said, just hated, couldn't stand going to school. It felt, painful, almost physically, just to see my school building, right? So that was going on for 5 weeks. And when I squashed the beef with the teacher, I guess that's when that's like the conflict resolution, or that's when I resolved the conflict. And now the body goes from being in a, say...
Fight or flight mode?
Yes, severe like fight or flight mode, or prolonged severe fight or flight mode, into a very deep rest and digest mode, I guess. So like...
And that's when the symptoms start, right?
That is exactly when the symptoms start. So like when... it's recording already. So when like the actual, I think, I'd say like the stress was taking place, that wasn't when the symptoms actually started to occur, but rather when they got resolved. Like when the stress was resolved, that is when the stress, like the actual symptoms start to appear. And according to German New Medicine, it basically has to do with, when your body is exposed to environmental stress or any type of stress, right? It does everything it can to, in its ability to adapt, right? To adapt, to kind of accommodate this new stress in your life, right? So in my case, because I was, always super I had this knot in my stomach. It was very, this kind of grudge, very dirty, very a nasty confrontational conflict phase, right? So what my body did to combat this or counteract this was to add cells to the stomach wall of my intestines to kind of further digest the confrontation or the grudge or the issue, because it was taking its toll on me. I always thought about it, and it would make me really angry all the time, right? So that's the belief of German New Medicine, that basically your body accommodates this stress by adding new cells to your body, right? But what happens once the conflict is over? Then your body senses that these new cells in your body are no longer needed, and it's time for what? Elimination, right? Elimination in my case was blood in the stool, right? Diarrhea or whatever, a bunch of nasty stuff that came about after I squashed the beef with this teacher. So usually this conflict resolution phase, or the healing phase as they call it, should last for not too long, right? Maybe a month or two, or I don't know, maybe 3, who knows? I guess it depends for every condition. But why is it so that in our case, this condition lasted for, a year, 2 or 3, or even 4 for some, or decades for some others, right? And GNM had an explanation for all of this, and that is what kind of made me regain a true sense of hope again, because it gave answers to questions I could never really get from Western medicine. And basically, this is all attributed to something called tracks. And I mean, if you want to learn more about this, then I think because it's a very deep subject, right? I think you can check. I think if you type in learninggnm.com, then you have a whole index of what you can, of conditions that you can read about. But essentially, tracks are what kind of shoot you back into the healing phase every time you're about to complete the phase, right? So when you complete the healing phase, that's essentially when you're completely healed and there's no signs of any symptoms, and you're pretty much, back in your A game, and you're good to go. But when when your body gets reminded of the conflict itself during this healing phase, it kind of gets thrown back into this loop that never ends, and that's when you're kind of stuck and never actually get out of this pain or whatever. And tracks can be anything from associating a sound or a food or a person, anything to this conflict that once was, right? So in my case, every time I had, I don't know, like let's say dairy, or every time I had some like fast food, whatever it was, like it could be anything. At one point it turned out to be like, for me, sort of specific sounds of like someone shouting, or like whatever, like anything. Just this, even the smell of going into a classroom, and like, that smell of old desk, old desk wood, whatever. These can be attributed as tracks, and the true healing started once I eliminated the tracks. And the way you eliminate the tracks is by convincing your body and convincing yourself that there is absolutely no reason as to why these tracks should induce this kind of
reaction.
What?
This reaction, and
yes,
convincing yourself that you are safe, right?
Yes, convincing yourself that you're safe, and that there's no reason for these tracks to relapse you back into this healing phase that is continually taking, giving you a beating, right? So that is why I kind of am a little, I'd say, the topic of holistic medicine and kind of eliminating foods, that's like an iffy subject for me, because I used to be one of those who tried to eliminate certain foods from my diet, thinking that was going to help me, but it turned out to be the mere opposite. Like eliminating all these foods kind of helped initially, but it made it a lot harder for me to trust the healing process and trust in my health being completely restored. Because if you truly believe you're healed, then you should believe that you can eat anything and feel fine, right? But I came to realize that what I had done previously was doing more damage than actual good. So I had to kind of rewire my brain into adopting a thought process, like a paradigm shift, that foods were not causing this, or foods weren't making things harder on me, or even like or weren't even aiding that much in my health, but rather my mental kind of attributions to, like what I attributed to these foods, were doing all the heavy lifting, I guess. So in my case, I convinced myself that I could tolerate this food because, and I just, start listing, reasons why. So I can tolerate this food because it contains nutrients, right? I can tolerate this food because this food is going to help me heal and provide me with the energy I need to heal, right? If I can't tolerate this food, then how come my brothers, my sisters, my mom, my dad, and everyone in my family, and everyone in the world can tolerate this food? How come I can't tolerate this food? Am I not human just like them, right? So I just kept on convincing myself of this, and eventually you start to think, some might think that this can get a little bit of you kind of wrestling with yourself, because it can get very doubtful at times that, does this really work? But as soon as you kept, if you keep on going, after a while, like for me, it took 2 to 3 weeks maybe before I actually started seeing results. And I kept convincing myself that these foods were, tolerable for me. I was tolerant of these foods, and I would just, freeball it and go and eat the food, whatever. And maybe the first time I wouldn't feel so great. But then again, I would convince myself a second time, and then I would not feel a change. And then the third time, I would not feel anything. I could now finally eat this food, right? And that's a track eliminated. Now I've eliminated a track. In my case, it was a food track, right? And you just pick things off the list just like that. You eliminate the food tracks. Okay, now when the food tracks are eliminated, you can now focus on the other stressful factors in your environment that are now tracks, whether it be, sounds, like in my case it was, someone raising their voice, or, screaming, or whatever. That would be a track for me that would kind of relapse me into this healing phase of a bunch of symptoms and shit again. So I had to convince myself that there's no reason whatsoever why someone raising their voice or high, or loud sounds would cause me to relapse again, or would cause me to suffer any greater than I was already. So that's all I had to do, just convince myself. And once I realized the power of the mind and the power of your attitude towards things, that's when I really had my breakthrough, and my health just started going, up and up and up, and I started to regain my weight. I started to eat all the food I wanted. Used to travel more, spend time with friends. Wasn't scared of running to the bathroom every 5 minutes, right? I could finally live my life as I've been so longing for, right? I've been longing for this to finally be over, so I could live my life completely without restrictions. And eventually I was able to do that. So around, I'd say 2021, beginning of 2021, I started to feel like myself again. So that is when I completely overcame it. I mean, even today, I feel like I have a lot to improve, right? But it's a never-ending journey. But the journey not only allows you to grow as a person and heal and reach your fullest potential, health-wise, but you feel like a different person, right? I felt like, me and Eric spoke about this earlier today, that do I regret having this condition of? I mean, not really, because it made me grow as a person. I felt as if this was kind of a blessing from God, or destiny or whatever, right? This was a blessing for me to find who I was, to grow as a person, not just for me but for others, so I could help others, so I could share my experience, that I could serve as an inspiration, a sense of inspiration to others who are dealing with the same thing, right? And it made me powerful as being able to believe in myself more and actually persevering through stuff like this, because this was by far the hardest thing that I ever had to do in my life, having to navigate through all of this. But it finally worked, and when it worked, it was totally worth it. So yeah, that's my journey. So a very long story, but I hope it helps, right? So
Absolutely incredible.
what about you, Eric? Do you want to take it from here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you so much for breaking down German medicine. It's definitely kind of mind twisting, and I mean, we kind of kept that high level. We can dive deeper into this in other videos if you'd like to hear more. The interesting thing about it is that for me personally, German new medicine basically didn't do shit. So I didn't even try it, because the stuff earlier that wasn't so helpful for Adam was actually what was part of my breakthrough. And then for other people in the group, it was different again, which just goes to show that these are very complex disease, right? Which might have had similar causes and might have similar solutions, but usually it can be very different. And a lot of times you have to tackle it from all directions. So one thing I really liked, and there's a great documentary called Heal, and they talk about it, and there are many others in the holistic health space that talk about it, is disease. What does that actually mean? Dis-ease, right? Not being at ease. And for both of us, it had been stress that really caused a condition. Now, I took antibiotics, which definitely was a big part of the cause of the disease. But it was also the stress. And it definitely makes sense that if I didn't have the stress of, kind of the get-rich-quick scheme I had done before I started my proper business, the advertising agency, that stress probably weakened my system to such a degree that when I put the antibiotics on top, it just broke down. And there were a lot of other things that were going on, traumas. I basically had a burnout. It wasn't just stress. I basically had a burnout from that thing. and a lot of negativity also going on in my life, a relationship with with people in my life and my families and so on, and that needed to be healed. And over the years, I tackled that. But for me, really the breakthrough, after I had done the carnivore diet, after I've started drinking the kefir, taking all kinds of supplements, doing the enemas, one huge breakthrough, which enabled me to, for the first time, to get off the medication, was actually a healing meditation from Dr. Dispenza. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but Dr. Dispenza is basically a guy who does gratitude meditations or manifestation meditations, where you manifest your dream life, your loved one, or whatever it may be, which, you know, kind of sounds woo, but it definitely makes sense when it comes to healing, right? When you feel the gratitude for already being healed, it basically evokes those self-healing powers within you. It evokes those hormones that heal the organs. And that's what it did for me. I watched his workshop, the progressive workshop, which explains the science behind it in depth. And basically what you do is that you set an intention, which is electro part of it, and then you feel an emotion, which is the magnetic part of it. You pull it back, and then you create an electromagnetic field with your intention, your thoughts, and your emotions. And that's how you draw that reality to you. And how does that work specifically? For me, my intention was health, right? So I visualized an age with like 2 lines around it, which symbolizes the electromagnetic field. And then I had like 3 bullet points with that. So for health, what did that mean to me? No more symptoms, right? No diarrhea, no fever, no shivering, no gut pain, you know? So no symptoms, being able to eat whatever I want, and no medication, right? These were kind of the 3 bullet points that went with that. So I basically visualized the age, and then I felt the emotion that I would feel if that was a reality right now, right? How would I feel if I was healed right now? This means gratitude, this means freedom, this means joy, this means relief, right? So I did his meditations, balancing of the energy centers and tuning into new potentials every day, right? Meditating 40 to 60 minutes for 60 days straight. And I'll also upload a video from one of my reactions back then, where I literally cried, right? And I could feel almost this invisible body of the disease radiating off me, like being freed from it and really feeling the health, right? Being it. And then afterward, after you feel that and visualize it, then you can let it go and surrender to a higher mind. And that's what you do. And for me, there was a huge breakthrough, because just 60 days after starting it, I had a couple breakthroughs. For the first time in a year, I was able to reduce my medication. And then I remember the date, on the 27th of December 2020 was the last day I had to take cortisone, and could wean off my medication. And from that point onward, I started introducing normal foods again, right? Not just eating the carnivore diet, but actually becoming vegetarian again, slowly but surely. And then over the year of 2021, I kept drinking kefir, chugging it down every day. And then over the course of that year, I basically healed myself to 95% or 99%. I don't say 100%, and I think this goes for both of us, because if we are really stressed out, or if we really overdo certain foods, if we eat shitty for 1 week straight, symptoms can start to occur. But I'm actually really grateful for it, and I know I could heal myself 100% if I wanted to. But I'm actually pretty happy with the state I'm in right now, because it's almost a biofeedback mechanism, right? Usually when you're stressed out, you just keep working, or you just keep being stressed, which is very toxic to your body. But right now, when I'm stressed, my gut sends me a little, Eric, come on, cool it down. And then I know, okay, I kind of need to rebalance my life. I need to start working out again, or I need to start meditating more, or whatever it may be, right? So yeah, that's how we ended up here. And this year we basically said, Adam and I, like, dude, we went through this together. We have very similar journeys. Let's go on a vacation together.
Right.
And that's when we figured, hey, what would be a better place than the Wim Hof Expedition, because he does the breath work, right, which within 20 minutes you basically reduce the inflammation to zero, and this stuff works. I remember back then, like, when I had severe pain, just doing his breath work within 20 minutes, I could basically reduce my pain from, oh my gosh, I can barely tolerate it, to, hey, it's basically gone. So it wasn't the entire healing, but it was a big part of the healing.
Definitely.
And that's why we decided to sign up, because when we saw it's not sold out, which usually it's always sold out, we thought, okay, we need to get those tickets. We went through the entire Wim Hof experience, which we can talk about in a second. But yeah, afterward we now spend a couple days here in Barcelona. But before our flight goes in like a couple of hours, right? I mean, it's already 2 a.m. or whatever, but we thought we need to record this podcast while we are sitting here together.
Yes.
So yeah, really happy that we managed to record this for you. We probably forgot like a bunch of stuff, but just wanted to convey the high level stuff, and then we can dive deeper in like other videos.
Yes, sir. Sounds good, man.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys. My pleasure, obviously, and Eric as well,
Yeah.
for dragging me into this video at 2:30 in the morning.
Say hello to Mama.
Hello, Mama.
On YouTube. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, no, but this is amazing, and hopefully this inspires a lot of people. And if there's like anything else, because usually when you're going through such a journey, like both of us had like even like the minor detailed questions, I mean, they go a long way. So like if anyone has like a small question, however silly it may seem to you, it means a lot to us to actually answer it, because it can help you a lot, right? So hopefully this kind of gave answers to a lot of questions that you already might have, but we're here to answer a lot more. So
Yeah.
please, I mean, feel free. I know.
Drop it in the comments.
Drop in the comments, whatever DM. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So it sounds good.
We'll put our Instagrams and whatever else in the description box.
For sure.
And before we wrap this up, just as a summary, in terms of like the most impactful stuff, for me personally, it had been fasting. So I did a bunch of intermittent fasting. I did OMAD, so 1 meal a day. Obviously the basics, right? Sleep, meditation, and so on were very, very helpful. Kefir, so fermented milk. At some point I switched from cow's milk to goat's milk. So I did kefir. So I fermented kefir with the grains out of goat's milk, because it's much easier to digest, no allergy reactions. The carnivore diet before I rebuilt the gut microbiome was really, really helpful. And then the Dr. Joe Dispenza stuff, because I literally remember sitting in my room being completely hopeless, right? Being in the victim mindset, then switching one gear up into the fighter mindset, right? Saying, okay, I'm going to battle this disease. I'm going to make it, right? I'm just going to fight for my life. Then switching up into the creator mindset and thinking, okay, let's be proactive. You don't need to be hopeless. What are the solutions? Step 1, step 2, step 3, right? I can create my life, being empowered. And then last but not least, like complete acceptance and gratitude for already being healed, right? So first you have the victim mindset, then you have the fighter mindset, the creator mindset, and then just being in flow with life, acceptance and gratitude. almost surrender, right? It almost goes full circle, but you're not a victim, but you surrender to the reality of already being healed and truly, truly feeling that, and then letting that go and surrendering it to a higher mind. I remember going through those 4 mindsets, which is a total mindfuck within like a couple seconds or minutes, and was so hard, but rewiring that all those emotional patterns and so on has been tremendously helpful. So that's a quick summary of the juicy stuff. Is there anything that comes to your mind?
Yeah, I'll just do a quick recap. I mean, for me, obviously it was German new medicine. And, you know, I didn't focus too much on, you know, specific foods, right? But definitely eat good food, right? Like, I don't even need to, like, exactly point to or say exactly what, you know, what
like
kind of food, but
Weston A. Price would probably be a good resource.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
Weston A. Price is a really good resource. I don't know, what's his book called? Do you remember?
Physical Degeneration or something?
Something like that, yeah, primitive.
So he was basically, just to give you some context, a dentist.
Let me see if I can... No.
Still recording?
Huh?
Yeah.
Still
So
recording.
he was like a dentist who basically studied the ancient tribes, right?
Yeah, he studied the diets of primitive cultures, right? All around the world. So he traveled to like, tribes in Africa and tribes all over the world, essentially, not just, you know, there, but, and he pretty much, you know, observed how people in these, you know, primitive, cultures prepared their foods and what they ate and how they ate it and why they ate it and whatever. And he drew the conclusion that people from primitive cultures had, you know, considerably, you know, a considerable less amount of, autoimmune issues or, you know, cavities or any health problems whatsoever. Like in some cases, like it was almost non-existent in the primitive cultures, right? But as soon as he went over to visit the Western, like, kind of societies, right, around, like, sometimes like just a few hundred kilometers away from these primitive cultures, right, immediately you could see like a 30% cavity rate, severe health issues and a bunch of other things, right? So definitely, I mean, his book is definitely worth a read. So like anything you can do to aid your body in healing is obviously, you know, preferable, right? But know that, you know, the foods won't be like the main like driver to your healing, but, you know, fixing the mindset first, you know, that's kind of what German new medicine covers, right? But obviously, you know, this comes like in a very close second. Focusing on foods that will nurture your body and not take energy away from it is obviously what you should do, right? So, you know, eat whole foods, more, you know, naturally packaged stuff. So like eat more vegetables, eat more, you know, that's well prepared. That's prepared in a way that's easily digestible, right? Try to include as much protein as possible in your diet. That's what I heard from Dr. Carolina, who's like one of the founders of German new medicine as well.
And who's the girl who you watched the video from like 10 times? Gina Jaya?
Ginny Patel Thompson, yeah. But I feel like I feel like you should watch her videos with a pinch of salt, because she can get, you know, very deep into the holistic stuff, which I believe will do probably more damage than good, do more harm than good, because I feel like when you go into the nitty-gritty stuff and like every single thing can be considered harmful, like every single ingredient on the back of like a cereal box or whatever. I mean, as soon as you get too deep into that, you can pretty much shoot yourself in the foot, because then you get overly obsessed, right? And then you attribute these different, you know, negative, give these negative attributes to these certain foods, and then you won't be able to tolerate it. It will just, you know, go against what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
But this is simply it. So German new medicine, focus on good food, no packaged sugary stuff, like obviously with common sense you would know what kind of like what is bad food and what is good food. So like fruit is obviously good, eggs, meat, whatever, like healthy fats, avocado, butter, whatever. It doesn't really matter, but as long as it's real food, right? Nothing, pre-packaged sugary, cereal or any other stuff like that. Anything that's in a package, right? That comes like with an ingredient list on the back is pretty much, something you should kind of not, completely stop, but, aim to kind of minimize a little bit. Definitely stop with the sugar because that's gonna, drain your energy levels during the healing phase. I mean, after the healing phase, after you've healed completely, then by all means do what you want to do. But hopefully you've learned that you would have learned a lesson after dealing with such a condition, right? So after the food, I would then say exercise. Exercise is extremely beneficial because and it doesn't really have to be any strenuous activity or like intense exercise. It can be just a brisk walk like every 2 days or every day for like 15 minutes maybe. It doesn't really have to be anything like intense, right? Because movement helps drain your lymphatic system. It helps your body, your immune system work at its optimal level, right? Dissipates inflammation, and then obviously along with the moderate exercise, I would pair that with something like the Wim Hof breathing technique and
cold showers.
Cold showers, perhaps. Yeah, that's great as well because that helps lower stress levels and helps increase noradrenaline and dopamine levels in your body, which gives you that kind of high on life feeling, right? Which will definitely help with your attitude as well to kind of heal. But that's definitely it on my end, and that's essentially kind of my breakdown of what I basically did to heal and get to where I am at today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
And also just rapid fire supplement list, things that definitely have, like a lot of stuff in the supplement stuff honestly won't probably make a big difference, but if you're malnutritioned, you probably want to look into that.
Yeah.
Biggest impact supplements in my opinion is vitamin D3. In combination with vitamin D3, you also want to take magnesium and vitamin K2 to balance that out. Vitamin C can be very, very helpful. And then there's a bunch of other stuff. I actually stumbled upon cat's claw just by researching, right? And this is probably the most important thing you can take from this because all the specifics don't really matter. The most important thing is that you don't give up and that you have the mindset, right? That you have the mindset to keep going no matter what, that you do your own research and that you don't stop. And the more pain and suffering you feel, the more drive you have to find new solutions and new things to try out. You have to constantly experiment with new stuff. Otherwise, you'll get stuck and homeless and succumb to conventional medicine. And this was really how we, right, found all of these new things. And it's amazing if you find groups, just get the fucking course if you can afford it. Otherwise, hit me up, right? Happy to help you out. And then with the guy I found on Reddit, right? He made a thread about how he healed himself. And he mentioned cat's claw, which was incredibly helpful in the later stages of healing for me personally. It's basically something from South America, which is supposed to lower inflammation, reduce stress, and repair DNA. No idea if this is true. There are probably no studies whatsoever. But if you're desperate, you are happy to trust anecdotal, testimonials. And a lot of times they are a lot more impactful than some studies that are funded by pharmaceutical companies that are obviously looking for profit. So stuff like vitamin D3, cat's claw, it doesn't really make sense for them to make a big study for that, which will cost millions and millions. So anyway, that being said, social life can be extremely impactful, right? Environment, nature, fitness, mobility, sleep, do your blood work, see if you got any malnutrition. Not vitamin, what's it called? Omega 3?
Yeah.
Can be very helpful. And there's a bunch of other stuff. But as I said, I mean, I basically have pages and pages of notes of the research I had done back then, iron deficiency, whatever it may be. Like, you need to take responsibility, right? The ability to respond to your situation and take this into your own hand, right? Take ownership. A lot of this stuff is kind of cliche, but it's true. And this is what will help you make your own breakthrough. So thank you for sticking around.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, it's been an incredible podcast. Long overdue also, right? It's 2022 and we kind of healed ourselves almost 2 years ago.
Sorry, guys.
Well, anyway, I hope this was of value to some of you, also served as inspiration. And yeah, I hope that you heal too. Healing is possible.
Yes.
So yeah, enjoy your life and looking forward to seeing you at some point. All right,
guys.
Peace out.
Bye. Okay, handshake now. Okay.
Hey!
Now I need to go and sleep. Right?
Right,
Catch the flight soon.
Catch the flight.
Woo! Let's do it.
We made it, bro.
Oh.